Most people remember Annie Miller's disappearance as something that happened at night. That detail comes up again and again in conversations, articles, and online discussions. But it is not true. Annie Miller disappeared in broad daylight. It was a warm afternoon in the summer of 1998, and she was 7 years old. She had light brown hair that her mother struggled to keep neat, and she was known in her neighborhood for wandering just a little too far when she got curious. Nothing about her stood out in a way that would later explain what happened. She wasn't rebellious. She wasn't unhappy. She wasn't running away. She was simply a child. That afternoon, Annie was last seen at 4:40 p.m. The Miller family lived near the edge of a small wooden area. It wasn't deep forest. It wasn't dangerous, at least not by reputation. Locals walked their dogs there. Teenagers cut through it as a shortcut. Parents let their children play near the tree line as long as they stayed close. Annie had done this before. Her mother later explained that Annie liked collecting things, small rocks, oddly shaped leaves, bits of bark that looked like faces if you tilt them just right. She kept them in a shoebox under her bed. Most of them meant nothing to anyone else. That day, Annie asked if she could go outside after finishing her snack. She was told to stay where she could be seen. She agreed. Neighbors would later give statements, each one slightly different. One woman said she saw Annie walking toward the trees, stopping every few steps to look down at the ground. Another said Annie was humming. A man mowing his lawn remembered a small figure near the woods, but couldn't say for sure it was her. None of these details seemed important at the time. They only became important later, when everyone started trying to reconstruct last normal moments. At 5:15 p.m., Annie's mother called her name from the porch. There was no answer. This wasn't immediately alarming. Annie had a habit of ignoring calls when she was focused on something. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At 5:30, her mother walked toward the edge of the yard. Annie wasn't there. The shoebox under Annie's bed would later be found untouched. The first search was informal. Family members, neighbors, people calling out her name, assuming she would answer at any moment. Someone joked that She was probably hiding. But as the sun lowered and the light changed, that joke stopped being funny. At 6:10 p.m., someone suggested calling the police. By the time officers arrived, the woods were already filling with noises. Search teams moved carefully, expecting to find a scared child stuck somewhere obvious. They found nothing. No footprints that made sense. No dropped items. No disturbed ground. Dogs were brought in, but the scent trail faded strangely close to the tree line, as if Annie had stopped being moving forwards. One officer later described it as unfinished. That word never made it into official reports. By midnight, the search expanded. Helicopters passed overhead. Flashlights cut through the trees. Names were called over and over again until voices went hoarse. Still nothing. At some point during the night, someone noticed how quiet the woods were. Not peaceful, just empty. The next morning, the story reached local news. A missing child. A photograph that showed Annie smiling awkwardly at the camera. The usual details. What the news didn't mention was how many small inconsistencies were already appearing. One volunteer claimed they heard a child crying shortly after sunset. Another said they heard footsteps moving away from them. Neither sound could be confirmed. On the third day, a backpack was found. It didn't belong to Annie. It was old, dirty, left near a cluster of trees that search teams had already passed through multiple times. No one could explain how it had been missed. Inside the backpack was nothing helpful. No identification, no clues, just empty space. Annie's parents were interviewed repeatedly. They answered the same questions over and over again, correcting small mistakes reporters made. Each time, the timeline shifted slightly, not because anyone was lying, but because memory is unreliable under pressure. Still, one detail never changed. Annie had not planned to go anywhere. A week passed, then two. Search efforts slowed. Though no one officially said the words everyone was thinking, the woods returned to their normal state. People avoided them anyway. Then something strange happened. A hiker came forward with a story. He said that on the fifth day after Annie disappeared, he saw a child standing near the edge of the trees. From a distance, he assumed she was waiting for someone. When he got closer, there was no one there. He hadn't mentioned it at the time because it didn't seem important. Only later did he realize the timing. Police followed up, but there was nothing to find. No evidence. No reason to reopen searches. The case quietly shifted categories. Years passed. The woods remained. Children grew up. New families moved in. But one thing stayed consistent. People avoided that part of the trail after late afternoon. No one could quite explain why. In 2006, a teenager filming a short project in the area claimed his camera battery drained suddenly near the tree line. The footage cut out mid-recording. When reviewed later, there was nothing unusual on it. Just trees. Just wind. Annie Miller was never found. No remains. No clothing. No answers. Her case remains unofficially unsolved. But locally, it never closed. There's one last detail that doesn't appear in police files. Several residents reported years later that sometimes, just before sunset, the woods seemed louder, not with animals, with movement, footsteps where no one could be seen. People still argue about what happened. Some say she wandered too far. Some say someone took her. Others refuse to speculate at all. But everyone agrees on one thing. Annie didn't disappear at night. She disappeared while the world was still watching. And that's what makes it hard to forget. Some afternoons don't end the way they are supposed to.